Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to do something a little bit different this time around. I want you to think of this as an architectural masterclass. We walk past monuments all the time, often totally oblivious to the hidden codes and the incredibly deliberate choices embedded right there in their blueprints. Well, today, we're taking a deep dive to decode the history and design of one of the most iconic structures in the United States, the Lincoln Memorial. So, grab your metaphorical notebooks because we are about to look really closely at how history is literally set in stone.
But before we even glance at a blueprint, I want to throw a question your way. How exactly do you build a monument to unity? Really think about that for a second. Unity is an idea, right? It's a completely abstract concept. So how on earth does an architect use physical, heavy materials like marble and stone and empty space to capture something so intangible? Keep that question rolling around in the back of your mind, because seeing exactly how the designers pulled that off is what makes this building an absolute masterpiece.
All right, let's jump right into our syllabus for this masterclass. Today, we're covering honoring the 16th president, the blueprint of a Greek temple, stepping inside the marble monument, and finally, its transformation into a symbol of civil rights.
Starting with Chapter 1, Honoring the 16th President.
So obviously, the memorial was built to honor Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, who served from 1861 to 1865. And for anyone familiar with American history, those specific dates jump right off the page. That 4-year window was when the very fabric of the country was literally being torn apart by the Civil War. Now put your architect hat on for a minute. How do you design a physical space to memorialize a leader whose entire time in office was defined by the fracturing of the country? It's a massive architectural dilemma. You're not just building a fancy tomb for a guy, you're trying to construct a physical representation of this bloody Herculean effort to keep a divided nation together. The design choices here were incredibly high stakes.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, the blueprint of a Greek temple.
Look at this timeline for a second. There is a huge gap between the end of Lincoln's presidency in 1865, the start of construction in 1914, and the official dedication in 1922. We are talking almost 6 decades to get this thing open to the public. So why did it take 57 years? Well, it wasn't some rushed, knee-jerk reaction. This was a heavily debated, generational project. And one of the biggest nightmares was actually the location. They chose this swampy patch of the Potomac River flats. To build a colossal marble monument there, the engineering required was mind-boggling. They had to drastically dredge the area, fill it in, and engineer the structure just to hold the sheer, crushing weight of a stone foundation. They literally had to manufacture solid ground before they could lay down a single stone of history.
Once they finally had solid ground to work with, the architect, Henry Bacon, made a really fascinating choice. He went with a Greek temple model. But he didn't just pick any random Greek style. He specifically chose the Doric order. Now, if you know your architecture, the Doric order is the simplest, most sturdy, and least flashy of the classical Greek styles. And that was absolutely deliberate. Bacon wanted the building itself to mirror Lincoln's own personality. Strong, grounded, completely unpretentious, and with zero unnecessary frills. By going with the Doric style, the temple instantly radiates this vibe of timelessness and democracy. It's meant to feel like it's always been there and always will be, just like the Republic itself.
But Bacon took that classical Greek blueprint and pumped it full of deeply specific American meaning, mostly revolving around the number 36. The exterior of the building features exactly 36 columns, and those represent the 36 states in the Union at the time Lincoln died. In fact, if you look closely, the names of those 36 states are carved right above the colonnade. Going back to our big question from the beginning, how do you physically build unity? Well, this is it.
Those foundational pillars, representing the states, are literally holding the roof up together. But the genius goes even deeper into the actual raw materials. To hammer home this theme of unity, Bacon sourced the building blocks from all over the country. He used granite from Massachusetts, limestone from Indiana, and the stunningly pure Yule marble from Colorado. He mixed materials from the north and the south to physically construct a temple out of a reunited nation. It's just brilliant.
All right, let's head inside. Chapter 3. Inside the Marble Monument.
Once you step through those columns, the architectural strategy shifts completely. It becomes this incredible study in contrasts. The inside is divided into 3 distinct chambers. The central chamber is kind of like the Holy of Holies. It's totally dedicated to physical visual art, dominated by that iconic marble statue of Lincoln by the amazing sculptor Daniel Chester French. But flanking that center space are 2 side chambers dedicated entirely to written art. The walls of these side rooms feature monumental engravings of Lincoln's greatest speeches, the Gettysburg Address on the south wall and the second inaugural address on the north wall. So the architecture essentially acts as this giant open book, perfectly balancing the visual gravity of the man in marble with the lasting weight of his words carved into the stone.
To truly appreciate what Daniel Chester French pulled off in that central chamber, we absolutely have to talk about scale. That marble statue is a towering 19 feet, or about 5.8 meters tall. But get this, it actually wasn't supposed to be that big. Originally, French had planned to make a 10-foot bronze statue. But once the temple was built, he and the architect walked in and realized, uh-oh, this cavernous interior space was going to completely swallow a 10-foot figure. The grand architecture was actually dwarfing its own main subject. So they made a massive pivot. They changed the material to bright white Georgia marble and nearly doubled the statue's size to 19 feet. Because of that choice, when you stand in that room today, the scale forces you to physically look up, elevating Lincoln and making you feel the true, heavy magnitude of that history.
Which brings us to our final chapter, a symbol of civil rights. You see, a masterclass in architecture isn't just about what a building is made of. It's about how the space is actually used by the people once the scaffolding comes down. Over the decades, the Lincoln Memorial evolved to symbolize 3 core pillars: freedom, unity, and equality. It stopped being just a quiet, static place for reflection and transformed into this active backdrop for citizens demanding that those ideals actually be met. And the crazy thing is, the architecture totally invited this. The physical layout of the space, those wide sweeping steps cascading down, and that long open vista of the reflecting pool stretching out, it naturally created a massive amphitheater for democracy. The space isn't walled off. The architecture literally accommodates and welcomes the masses gathering together.
And there is absolutely no greater example of this space being utilized than what happened in August 1963 during the March on Washington. This is the exact spot where Martin Luther King Jr. stood and delivered his unforgettable "I Have a Dream" speech. Just think about how King visually leveraged the architecture for that moment. He deliberately positioned himself in the literal shadow of the great emancipator to cash what he called a promissory note. He used the physical monument and that massive scale we just talked about to lend this undeniable historical weight to his modern message. Henry Bacon designed a classical temple with 36 columns of unity, and decades later it served as the perfect pre-built stage for one of the most pivotal civil rights moments in American history.
Because of that incredible foundational design and the profound historical moments that have played out on its steps, the Lincoln Memorial remains one of the absolute most visited landmarks in Washington, D.C. It draws millions of people every single year. It's not just a dusty memory. It's a heavily maintained, living piece of active architecture.
The careful preservation of that Yule marble, the meticulous lighting that illuminates the statue and the columns at night, it all ensures that the monument stands as an ever-present sentinel over the Capitol. It's living proof that when architecture truly captures deep, resonant human ideals, people will just naturally be drawn to it over and over again.
So as we wrap up our architectural masterclass today, I want to leave you with one final big thought to chew on. How does physical architecture actually shape our national memory? When millions of us stand beneath those 36 columns and gaze up at that 19-foot statue, how does the sheer weight and design of that space dictate the way we remember our past and how we envision our future? It's a pretty powerful idea, right? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope you walk away looking at the buildings around you just a little bit differently from now on. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.